Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's 9:45. The clock is a little slow. So I'll just go on by my time. My name is Andrew Nakamura. I'm a DBA at Keck Medical Center, USC, down in LA. Normally on Saturdays is my day of worship. I usually teach a class in the Bible. So if you'll forgive me for a minute, it would be terrible if I recorded myself and a lot of my students went on YouTube and they said, "Why are you teaching on Saturday on a technical subject?" And then I can say, "At least I prayed." So if you indulge me for a little bit, I want to say a little prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, please forgive me for teaching a class on Powershell on your holy day. May you continue to bless me and the students here. May you use me mightily in everything I say. Continue to bless everyone here and my students back home. May you receive a rich blessing in honor of your name. In holy praise to you. Amen. All right, everyone. Well, we shall begin. Keck Medical Center, USC. This is just a little blip on USC. They're a university-owned academic center, something like UCLA. We're supposedly the top medical school in Southern California. We have a care medical group, 3 hospitals, I think going to 4 hospitals pretty soon, and career opportunities. One of the unique opportunities of working at USC that you might not know if you are looking for you or your children to get degrees is if you work there, your education is free for 1 degree, not all the degrees. So if you are looking for a master's degree or a PhD, they will sponsor that. If your kids would like to go, hopefully you have a couple more than one like I do. If you have 2, 3 kids, it might behoove you because the tuition is fairly expensive. So you might want to check that out. I know it's far here. Do you know this guy, Jeffrey Snover? Why you should learn PowerShell? One of his very famous statements, according to all the other PowerShell gurus, is you either learn PowerShell or find another line of work. Right? That's what Don Jones is saying. That's what all the big PowerShell players are saying. This was said something in the what's called the Monad Manifesto. It's how PowerShell was created. How many PowerShell newbies do we have here? All right, so you're in the right class. I was thinking everyone's going to be a PowerShell expert and just come and throw tomatoes. So this is a very important document. It tells you how PowerShell got started and what was the reason behind it and where it's going to in the future. So they still got a little bit more work to do. They are finally putting the final touches on something called DSC. If you are a newbie at that, I would highly recommend you look this video up. It's on channel 9, I think, of TechNet. You can look his name or lots of videos referencing his name. He's got lots of beginner PowerShell sessions, and this is a very good key person to keep in your hat, Jeffrey Snover. How many use SQL Core? No SQL Core? Yes? How many use SQL Core? Nobody using SQL Core. So this is one of the beauties of Windows. How many love the Windows 8 desktop? Don't you just love that GUI and you gotta hit that Windows key button and everything's shifted around? Don't you just love that? Don't you know that's the same GUI that you get in Windows 2012 Server? It's the same exact interface. Just kind of get this GUI feeling, new user. But what happens when you get something like that? Now, why would you want to know this? Well, maybe your company today is not using Core. Maybe you say, well, why should I learn Core? Why should I do that? What's the whole point of Core? Well, have many of you run your own labs before, like in VMware or VirtualBox or something? Anyone run their VM? Are you running them in Core? Because if you run in Core, there's something special. How much minimum memory of RAM do you need in Windows to run SQL Server? Come on, guys. What? More than you have? Yes, that's true. 512 megs, very good. Because normally on the sheet it says 1 gigabyte, right? But if you run Core, you can squeeze that down to 512. Now that doesn't mean a big deal to you until you start playing with a technology called always on. You ever heard of this? You know, you gotta have like maybe 4 or 5 SQL servers to really play with this. How are you going to run 4 or 5 SQL servers on a 8 gig box, right? So you got to have some way of squeezing down the memory so you can play with this. SQL Core is your key to learning, right? Because you don't need to go to the desktop environment on Windows and pull all your SQL Server, because most of you connect, right, through SSMS, right? You connect to your server, so you don't need the GUI on the server anymore, right? And if you don't need the GUI on the server anymore, do you think Microsoft might be moving in that direction? Might be moving to perhaps taking your desktops away from servers in the future? I think so. Because do you know who's in charge of System Center and PowerShell? It's the same guy I put up, Jeffrey Snover. And do you know where he's moving everything to? PowerShell, back to the command line. That is correct. So if you're thinking, well, you know, I can just learn the mouse and click here, click there, oh, be very careful. It's coming. After DSC comes along, you better be careful. That might be in the next release, you know, SQL 2018 or 2020. That might look like that, right? And what are you going to do when you log on and that's all you get? Do you know how to do stuff then? Or how about this? How many heard of managed service accounts? Anyone heard of this? Now, managed service accounts are unique because you can only do them in PowerShell. There's no right click and add a service account. You can only do them in PowerShell. And you can manage them in PowerShell. The only thing you can do is delete, right, in the GUI. But everything else, creating, setting them on a server, doing all the fancy stuff is only through PowerShell. Now, why do you want to know this? How many got lots of SQL servers? Anyone got lots of SQL servers? And how many are you following the security best practice? Every SQL service has to have its own AD account. How many are doing that? Your own so in your AD, you got a container like service accounts, and for every service you're running, that's engine, agent, integration, replication, you got a service account for each one. Now, do you know what the best practice is to manage those service accounts? Like the passwords? How many know? Every 90 days, you are supposed to change that. Now think about that. Let's say you have 100 SQL servers, and you're running at least engine and agent. That's 200 service accounts every 90 days. Do you want to go right-click, change password, right-click, change password, restart the service, right-click? Do you want to do this? Or do you want to just run a script in PowerShell? PowerShell, my friends, that's going to save you a lot of time, right? So you have to start thinking about how you're going to manage multiple services, multiple servers, command line. You have to move away from the always point and click, and I can do that, I can do this, but you have to think, how can you do it repetitively, over and over through a multitude of machines or services or accounts or whatever you're attempting to do. So this is the overview of today's talk, although it's going to be a demo-rich talk. I had a hard time coming up with all the slides because I want to go everywhere and try to slam everything, give it to you all in one shot, but this is a beginner slide, so if I'm going too fast, just slow me down. Just say, I'm not getting it, help, right? So the first one, even Jeffrey Snover says, this is his favorite commandlet, is help. If you really understand how to use help, man, this is going to save you a lot of trouble. Because as DBAs, as IT professionals, who do we go to for our very first source of information? You get that error, and where do you go? Google, right? Dr. Google knows everything. But in this case, maybe not. Maybe it's better to use the Microsoft help. Ugh, yes, I know. Using Microsoft. And then we go to commandlets. What kind of commandlets should you be knowing off first? So everything in PowerShell is called commandlet. So these commands, like you're used to copy, dir, all these commands are basically commandlets. So there's small little programmatic things you can stuff in this called shell and make PowerShell do something. After that, you should learn how to pipe the commands. So you can just chain them. Remember in the DOS back days, you could just take these bat files and string them all together. That's sort of what pipe commands, but a little bit more powerful. And the last one is SQL management objects, or better known as SMO. This is where the DBA kind of plays in the SMO space. Because everyone I've heard, every PowerShell is always stuck over here in the commandlets. They're talking about how to do something with the domain controller, how to do something with Active Directory, but I'm not a network guy. I'm not an AD guy. I'm not a sysadmin. I'm a DBA. Give me DBA stuff. So this one right here, that's going to be your ticket. So if you learn anything from this session talk today, is learn this. Most powerful tool you can use is the SMO. So we'll go with help. When you log on your system, the first thing you should do is get help, right? Get help update though, because you don't know when the last time it was updated. So when you open your PowerShell command, you just go get help and update. Why do you want to do that? Because PowerShell might have been installed a year ago or a second ago. But you don't want to take that chance. When you're using help, just run the get help update. Some other tools, you want to use PowerShell script browser. Anyone use this? No? Use this PowerShell script browser. You can just basically Google this. You download it, and it'll have this nice 9,000 scripts for you at your fingertips within the ISE. ISE is the integrated something environment, scripting environment. Thank you. And SQL PSX, this is the PowerShell extensions. I just put this in here because there's good stuff and not so good stuff. Unfortunately, I don't use a lot of SQL PSX modules. What I use, though, is a lot of SMO and a lot of SQL PS, which is this PowerShell module. So when you get help, you want to be at least wise enough to look at the help files and what do they have for my problem that I'm facing today. And if it's not in there, how about one of these? It should be somewhere in there before I go to Dr. Google. Because what happens in Dr. Google? Anyone know? What happens when you go on Dr. Google? You get everything, right? You just get everything, and then you're sitting there, okay, well, that's not for me, and that kind of looks like my problem. Well, no, this kind of look. In Dr. Google, it gives you so much, and then you're filtering down to what you really need. That might take you 5 minutes, or that could take you a couple of hours. How many have done the couple of hours kind of work, right? But here, in the update, they won't give you a couple of hours. They just give you what's there. And same thing with the script. They just kind of give you what's there. So the commandlets. I'm going to run through a lot of the slides at first, and then I'll just shoot the demo. Hopefully the connectivity is good because I'll actually connect and you'll actually see my environment. The PowerShell way, right? The Windows 8 and Server 2012. Anyone playing with Windows 8, 8.1 at least, right? Anyone got that really in production? So Windows 8, PowerShell, okay, nice to use, but you want to get away from that graphical user interface. You want to start playing with the PowerShell. And again, Microsoft is fending for the user, but you're a DBA, right? So think yourself DBA-ish. So you want to pull away from just using the GUI tool all the time. What if you can use it some other way? Now, how many know that things are already being built that is underneath PowerShell, right? So the interface you're looking at is running PowerShell commands. So why don't you just figure out what those PowerShell commands are? Too bad there's not a profiler on the PowerShell commands, right, that you can figure out. But underneath, the new stuff that is coming out, like, Exchange, probably System Center, all of that is running PowerShell commandlets now. So that means if that's running that, that means you can run the PowerShell commandlet in a script or programmatic way. Here are some of the commands. These are some of the commands you'll probably use. The aliases are right there. Get command, what kind of commands do I have access to? GCM. Get PS drive, right? PS drive. Get member, what does it mean? Is it an object? Is it integer? Is it a variable? You'll use this a lot. Get WMI object or GWMI. I use this a lot on this logical disk because, right, when you get that disk failure or that failure for that SQL backup, what do you first suspect? The disk probably ran out of room or something, but how much space is on there, right? When you go to SQL and you go look, you use what? XP fixed drive or something like that, right? And you look for free space, but it doesn't tell you how big the drive was or what the rate of growth and something like that. So use this a lot. Get process, right? You can use PS or GPS. That's why the slash is there. And get service. So these are the basic commands you should have in your belt, when you go up to PowerShell and you see this window, these are some of the things you should get used to. So as a 101 person, just getting used to the commandlets, just type these in, right? They're just automatically, you can just type these in, get the alias, and just pop them in, right? Just see what they do. What do they bring up? And so you want to move yourself from commandlets. So think of the picture, right? So you got the help. Now you move to commandlets, get someone under your belt. Doesn't take a whole year to learn all these, right? Just type in the commands. Once you type them in, they get kind of used to your brain, how it works, right? Oh yeah, I remember how to get that. And then, hopefully, get to the demo. Okay. How can I get this over here? Oh, thanks, Ben. Gave me that email. And if I can get this to work, well, I guess it's not working. Well, let me show you then. Since I can't get that, I'll give you some of my mail. Well, I may not give you that yet. Technical difficulties, don't you love them? Okay, well, this is not going to work. I can't get the screen that I'm looking at here to there.
Oh, do Windows B.
I have a Mac.
Oh, it's a Mac. Yeah, that's gonna be hard.
But it should be the same function, right? Okay, well, this is not working. Honey, maybe you can run and get somebody to flip the screen. Some help there. Sorry about this. Yeah, so what I was going to show is my environment. I'm running 8 servers. It's on my local workstation at work. And the reason why I do that is it's got 2 SQL servers, or 1 DC, 2 SQL servers that have 1 gig apiece, and then the rest are core. And what I want to show is when you open the browser and you log on to my core boxes, that's all you get is that machine. And then we would run through some of the commands. Some of the commands I would do, of course, is get help. But I want to show you that script library browser part. So when you install it, it'll come up in your ISE, and it'll be on the right-hand side, and then you can just type in commands that way. And unfortunately, it's like right on the side, though. How can I get it? Yeah.
the Apple menu, and then select System Preferences, and then Displays, and then select Arrangement, and then Mirror Displays.
Oh. Sorry, guys. So there it is.
There you go.
Thank you. So this is, of course, I had to reset my, I'm using the evaluation version. And so I'm checking to make sure that all my, yes, I did get it to work. Thank you. Yes.
No, you're good. Yeah.
So when you log in, you just get this screen, right? And then what do? Where would you do? So one of the first commands you should probably do is, well, is probably PowerShell. That would help. And you notice you'll move into PowerShell because it'll say PowerShell. And now what do you do? For one of the first things I would probably do is figure out, and we're going very slow here, is to figure out the version I'm running. So you would just type host, and hopefully when the comes back up, you'll see that I'm running version 4.0. Now, some of you still running 3.0, and that's okay, but remember DSC will only work with 4.0. So I highly suggest you start looking at DSC. What's DSC, and why do I keep mentioning that? That is the end road for PowerShell. So you want to start thinking about that. How does it play in my PowerShell kind of learning? And where you want to go with that is, anyone know what Puppet is, or Chef, or Linux? Well, imagine you have a SQL Server, and you want it to install. So what would you do? You could do command line, or pop in the CD and go next, 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 like a good sysadmin would, and get SQL Server up. But what happens when you got 20 of these things? Okay, no problem. You sysprep them all, and then you do the same thing 20 times. What happens when something goes wrong on one of those machines, like it loses a DLL or something? Well, you would just normally go back and clean that up. DSC is something different. It's something like Puppet and Chef for the Linux world. It just goes every 15 minutes, I think, and checks, hey, I'm supposed to be a SQL server. I'm supposed to have these DLLs with these registry keys, with this and this and this. Do I have this? And then the server responds, yes or no. And if it doesn't, let me go install it by myself. And it does it automatically. So DSC is very important for you, especially in PowerShell, because it only works in PowerShell 4.0, right? So you want to have that in mind where you want to go. So you kind of want to keep 4.0. Even though most of the 3.0 does work, so you'll get your hands wet in 3.0, you want to move yourself to 4.0. So after this, after I'm on my domain controller, as you see up there, right? So I'm running 8 machines, DC3 and SQL 01, SQL 02. I highly recommend for a lab, just use the evaluation version. Why do I say that? The 180-day evaluation. Why would I say that? In 180 days, 6 months, I'm going to have to redo everything. That's the point, right? I talked to so many sysadmins, they don't want to reinstall everything. I said, then why is it a lab? What purpose is that? And see, they don't get that they can script all that and make the install automatic, right? They want to sit there, next, 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 forever. But you want to move beyond that. You don't want to keep clicking next, next, next forever. You want to do these commands. So what commands did we learn, right? Like PS drive. Oh, actually, I guess I could have just typed that, I think. So what kind of drives do I have on my machine? Or this? So it tells me I got these, right? So this is like same thing, Win32 disk. So kind of gives you a little bit more information, right? The registry and stuff. So these are places I can browse through. I can actually, go through just like CD and walk through these. Now I don't have SQL there. Why don't I have SQL? Following best practice, don't put SQL Server on a domain controller, right? So you want to keep your DC, just a DC. Do you know how much memory I'm running on this guy? Because it's just doing what? What does a DC do? Authentication, right? I don't have any printers. I'm not doing any file sharing. I'm just doing what? AD. So how much memory do I need? My friend from the back left. No. Can you believe that? I'm breaking Microsoft best practice. I'm running 384 megs of RAM, right? I can even squeeze that down to 300. Yeah, in the lab, you can keep squeezing down and down. So you can get them as small as you want before the thing no longer works, right? That's why the lab is there. So this is running on 384 megs of RAM. So because it's only doing what? Just checking authentication, right? But how do you work with this? Because it's just a blank box. Well, that's where your tools come in. And so if we flip over here, and here's the tools, and here's a script. So you guys know this, right? Here's your basically CMS, a central management server. Anyone using CMS? So usually you put all your SQL servers in a CMS, and then you pull the registered servers up and you click through. Now you can just have them nice and neat there. And there's all my connections, right? So from SQL 1 through 7, all my SQL servers on the top. Now, here's some things that you begin to play with in PowerShell. Here I have a script, right? And it looks like it's using AdventureWorks. And I'm just basically calling from Books Online. So this is just calling stuff in Books Online. So it's just got the reference there. And this was something I've heard other people do. They take in Books Online, made a query, and then hit it on the database. Anyone do profiler traces on databases that you want to then upgrade? Anyone do that? Anyone know what I'm talking about? So you got this development environment, right? And you're upgrading to production. You move the database to production, but you want to simulate the same kind of traffic you have, right? So you go to profiler, capture all your traces, right? And stick them, and then you start, how many use distributed replay or anything like that? So you use something like that, but why don't you make a simple one like this, right? So you got a standalone lab. This lab running in my machine is by itself. And what I mean by that, it has no connectivity outside the world. So that's why it makes it good, right? So because you don't want stuff hitting internet-wise, hitting this. So this only has connection between DC and all the SQL servers and nothing else. Nothing in the domain or anything like at the work or something. So work gives me a nice big beefy box. It only got 12 gigs of RAM. But it's enough to run this kind of query. But how do you normally run query? You put it up in a script browser and then you F5, right? And you put it in the next SQL server, F5. What if you can put this, and this is where you start moving from commandlets to the next stage, right? You have a nice little stuff you want to run, and what if you start doing PowerShell that looks like this, if I can get it. Come on. So there's my profile in the back. And if I can minimize that. And here's my AdventureWorks. Now, here's what's interesting. I'm going to run this on another server. And as you see there, I'm going to run it on SQL 02. Now, I'm on SQL 01, but I'm going to run it on SQL 02, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to reference it. So now you see the power, because I can now just put in there SQL 03, SQL 04. As long as I have these kind of connect and everything, as long as I have that, a database called AdventureWorks 2012 or whatever, as long as I have this, I can connect. And that means I can start doing these random queries. So that means the queries live on where? SQL 01. But I'm running them on SQL 02. So I have a kind of nice storage place for all my queries, but I can run them on different boxes. And I can keep testing them. And now if I can do this, that means I can run them kind of in a job. And that means I can run them over and over multi-job. So if I run this guy, hopefully it works. And now you see it start going, right? These are the output. So if we go back to Profiler, we'll see that kind of activity. There's where the managed service accounts. If I can minimize that. Wow, the connection is very slow. Okay, don't have it there. Where did my... Okay, well, let's run another one then. Oh, I know where it is. I think it's in SQL 2, maybe. Is it in SQL 2, maybe? No. Hopefully it shows up there. There they are, right? Well, I guess you can't see that, right? So you can see that it's coming, right? That's on SQL 2. So what's nice about this is, okay, I just taken a script, and that was a SQL script, and I just stuck it into PowerShell. And now PowerShell is running, and it's dumping query data, and it's randomizing the queries that I have in Books Online or however it was. And this was something neat because I wanted to see traffic on the box, wanted to give it some load. But imagine you scheduled this in PowerShell Scheduler and you just kept doing these loads, and now you can keep loading the server until it reaches a threshold that you're looking for. Maybe you want to simulate 100 connections. So now you keep...
Get random function, right, in there.
Yes. 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 And so I could put that script up. I think there is something. Actually, there was a SQL Saturday in which I wanted this. And I said, man, that's really cool. I can do something like that. I can randomize queries and have this load on my box. And it was only for 2008. And I was just like, oh, give me for 2012. And so finally I figured it out. It basically is, again, a bunch of queries, and it just randomizes the queries. But you can do that now for your tests stuff, right? You don't have to use Books Online, right? You can do other queries that you actually get in production and do this. And now you can kind of simulate user, simulate load on different boxes. You don't have to keep using Profiler Trace, right? Because what's wrong with Profiler Trace and using Profiler? It's got a footprint, right? It's a pig, right? I mean, you're only looking for specific ones you want, not everything, right? So as this goes, this is like causing a load, but it's only a load on a certain database, not everything. Even though you filter it out, right, or use extended events, it's still giving a kind of a load that you don't want. You want it to run something like this. So let me go back. If I can. So those are some of the commandlets. Piping commands is the next thing you should learn. Piping commands, so you get to know the commandlets, so you understand help, you understand how to use commandlets, and you get fancier commandlets, right? Like get service, okay, so that gets all the service, and then you get alias, and so you get to that point, and maybe you can do some randomized stuff in there, but piping commands is probably a little bit better. So this is an example I saw. This is like get shapes, so to speak, if you have this idea. So it's basically get shapes, and it pulls all the shapes. And then when you start to pipe commands, it says get the orange shapes. So get shapes, and then you pipe where shapes equal orange. And then you do it again, and it says get orange shapes and put them in order, right? So piping commands is very important because you start to move into stringing the commandlets together. And let me give you a demo on that. Okay, let me stop this. So imagine you're here, and you're like, oh, I know this. I'll just log in here. And always use the same password for everything in a lab. You'll cause yourself a world of hurt if you don't. But then you get this, and now you're like, okay, what do I do? He said to run PowerShell. So you run PowerShell, and now you're here. But now you want to look at stuff. So you can look at the drives, normally look at the services, right? But you want to start piping commands. So you GSV, right? So that's get service. But that just gives you a whole, like that orange stuff, all those shapes, that just gives you that. But what you really want is, you want to where name equals, let's do like. I run this command almost all the time, every day, right? I just want to see, are my SQL services running? I do this every day, almost, without a doubt. So this is where the pipe comes in. So get service and then pipe, and then where, what are you looking for, right? So then you pipe it, and after this, do you want to sort it? Do you want to just restart the service? What do you want to do? So that's where you begin to pipe commands, right? So let's say I say, oh yeah, the SQL server, let's try the agent, right? So, and unfortunately, you got to learn these little equals. It's not equal like that. MS SQL Server Agent. So you say like this, and then you can pipe another command. And you just basically restart the SQL service. So you begin to string these commands together. You know, you're looking for, so the pipe is very important that you look for one thing and then you narrow down. So it can filter out and does stuff like this, so you can restart service, you can pull computers, let's say, and you begin to move yourself beyond just the 101 area, especially when you begin to pipe commands. And this becomes useful because how many ever want to know what's on that box, right? So maybe you do something like, okay, what's running on here? So that tells you everything Task Manager shows, right? But that's just the gobbledygook, right? But you can see SQL agents there, SQL Server. So you know you got a SQL box, right? Because agent is running and you see that. So you just type these commands and you get really good after day doing this, because you don't have to connect RDP and go into the server. You can just do this, right, from command line. And I know you're thinking, well, what good is all that? But have you done this one? Feature. That might take a little bit. But this is, ever go to that one pane where you says, well, what's exactly installed on this box as a role and as a feature? Anyone go to that GUI, right? You click on, well, there it is. The only thing is everything's available and some of it's installed, right? So you just want to see, well, great that that's available and I get to see it, but wouldn't it be nice? Hopefully that's right. Why don't you just rather type that? You see, so the pipe gives you a lot of ability to say, this is what's installed on my server. Bang, right? So you log on, and once you learn these commands, it becomes really, memorization is pretty easy. Begin to start doing where and stuff like that. So that's useful. But what I find myself is it's only point in time, right? Because you go on the box tomorrow, that might not be true. Because a sysadmin can go in there, right? Got messy hands and install something you didn't want to have installed. Anyone here heard that pain before? So where do you go? What do you do? So you move yourself from learning help, learning some commandlets, doing something like this, learning piping. But where I want to have all of us move is the next phase, right? And that phase is right here. That phase, hopefully, is right here. So we can play that, right? SMO. So here it's the .NET objects provide management to SQL Server objects, and the ones you will use most of the time, well, I use most of the time, let me back that up, is I use this one, right? SMO server, management SMO server. Do you remember your SSMS, your management studio? Yes? Everything in that SMS I can find that I do lives in here. So everything that my SSMS is doing, I can do something in here. So backup is something I do, right? Database management, SQL job agents. That's the key one, man. I spend a lot of time in that. Come on. I'm not going. That wasn't it. Let me just go through all the slides and I'll show you a cool demo. So help, commandlets, pipe, and SQL management objects. Let me show you this guy. Anyone monitoring their SQL jobs? Yes? So when your job fails, you're supposed to get a message, like job failure and stuff. You know, you can buy tools like this, but the tool's a little expensive sometimes, right? You buy something off the shelf, and they don't kind of do everything you want it to do, but they do majority. What if you could do stuff in PowerShell and just have this spit out? So one of the things I do is I basically have all these reports coming to us, and that was Ben Miller giving me an email. But here, this is a report. It basically scans all the servers we have. We have about 75 servers, SQL servers, and basically it scans through all the disk and dumps to me what the current drive level is, how much backup space it has, and basically it just tells you, right? You can just see it right this. And then I tell it, give me, you can see, let me show you this one. Probably better here. So here you see I have warning. Sometimes I have alerts, right? Alarm, rather, right there. So this is real. This just ran, what, this morning, 4:30. So I'm just basically scanning all my stuff and dumping it in one report, and then I can quickly look, give me everything. And why do I want everything? Because it gives me history, right? So eventually I want to dump this in a database, but it gives me history because I know some manager or some auditor is going to, do you remember January, what our disk space was looking like? Do you remember, did we lose a drive back then? And I said, no, I don't, but I have a report that I can go back to. See, the auditor is the one that's going to be asking you these crazy questions, right? Now take a look at this one. This one is really interesting. This is a daily job report. It's all out of PowerShell. So what it does is it scans through, again, all the SQL agent jobs, grabs up everything, and then just gives me what failed, because I don't care about what succeeded. Gives me what failed and dumps it every day to me, and I pick this up every day. Now, you know what I'm using? I'm using SMO, Job Server Agent. And I'm just doing this every day, right? And it just feeds me every day for that. And this is just PowerShell code. There's no, I don't have to pay a license for it. When a new server gets online, I could have 10 dev servers. I don't care. I don't pay a license for every one, so just run on everything, right? That's our attitude. If it's SQL, we own it, we monitor it. And this is one of our monitoring tools. My other DBA, he cannot live without these reports. He says, the job didn't run. I have to have this job run every day for me. And this tool, because imagine what would you do? Think about when you go back to your environment. How do you get this? You go to SSMS, you go to the job, and you click one by one, right? And then you look, how many have like 2 jobs or 3 jobs? Or do you look like mine, like 50 jobs, and then you're looking for that red X, right? And then what do? Right click, see how many times it failed, when it failed, why it failed. Oh, man, imagine you have 100, 500 servers to do like that. That's all you're doing all day, right? Then your boss comes, why haven't you built that SQL server yet? Why haven't you been in my meeting? Why haven't you? And it just keeps going like this. You've got to figure out how to automate yourself. And PowerShell is going to be the way. Why PowerShell? What's the whole big deal with PowerShell? Is because Microsoft, that's where they're moving to, DSC. They want to pull you out of this kind of clicking one by one, going through here. Let me show you the code here. This is such a nice code here. if I can get it here. Okay, well. Close that. If I could show you this script one day. Is it not? Gee. Sorry, guys. Oh, this was that script browser that I was talking about. Let me pull over here. This is the script browser I'm talking about. When you install it, it looks like this. And then you type in what you're looking for. Like, let's say I'm looking for service or something. And it'll pull up all these scripts for you. So it's basically people put scripts and they put it in the library. And then it just gives you a better way instead of always going to Dr. Google. So you just have an easier way of just referencing stuff. And then you can click in there and you can play with that. I'm sure it's not that hard. This is the key thing before I finish up here. The main part of the code is just right there, right? Remember that SML object? This is what you'll start to be doing. Now, you'll eventually learn after commandlets and pipelines, you'll eventually learn how functions, then modules work. And where I learned all this, and it sounds really complicated, where I learned all this was basically 2 books, just 2 books. It was the Month of Lunches series by Don Jones and Jeffrey Hicks. Those 2 books have, and they're not SQL, which is why I don't kind of like it, but they just tell you the basics to get in, and they don't tell you this part, right? So when you get to that part of how do I start scripting out my SQL databases, how do I get, and where's all the SQL objects? They don't have that there, but I do, right? So you could just email me. Yes?
There's an excellent book out there called SQL Server Administration 2008 with Easy on PowerShell, and that's a great reference book.
Yes, yes. The only thing is, it's not 2012. Yeah, so the 2012 and 2014, I want stuff to be current, right? So I'm reading and learning, because what are my labs? I'm going to push all 2012s and 2014s in there. Because what is the boss going to say? Well, gee, thanks for figuring out that on 2005. Oh, thanks for figuring that script that was breaking in 2000. What is he going to really say? He's going to say, what do we need to do to move to 2014? What is the service pack? How many installed service pack 2 yet? 2012? Nobody? Good for you. We're experimenting with that. Oh my goodness, it's having such a hard time. Be very careful with that. we're finding ourselves doing about 2 hours of maintenance Scrabble there. So be very careful with service pack. But that was in the lab. And we started that in our dev boxes, right? So we start pushing stuff. The boss and the management is not going to ask you for 2000 and 2005, although hopefully you're not in a situation where you're managing those servers. They're going to ask you for the new stuff. So that's why I want to learn how to do the new stuff. And the only way I can do that is if all my automated tasks that I do every day as a DBA, right? Check jobs, check the database spaces, if I have a way to automate that. So I'm not doing that all the time. I'm doing something else, right? So half my job is checking all that, but writing script like this, right? Writing functions and modules that I push, and eventually all this goes into a database. All the failed jobs go into a database. Why does it go into a database? Why do you think? Well, because we're DBAs. We want everything in the database, right? But you see, for sysadmins, they just want it in a text file. What's wrong with a text file for us? Hard to query. Imagine the auditor coming up to you. Do you remember what happened in January last year? Why you had 56 errors? You're going to look at them like, what are you talking about? That auditor is going to nail you for that, right? And if you're not being audited today, believe me, they're coming. They're always coming down, right? And so you have to be aware that you have to get your stuff in databases. Now, you don't have to get all your event logs because they're already saved, hopefully. But what about the database stuff and tuning stuff that you do all the time? That you're touching this, touching that, touching sensitive information? You probably want to record that here and there. So you just want to be aware and be prepared. And the way you prepare yourself is PowerShell. Learn one little command at a time, learn the books, learn step at a time. Right? I didn't learn it all overnight. I went through the same frustration as many of you, but at least I had the kind of perseverance to keep going. And fortunately for you, you could just email today, right? And Ben Miller and I are here. We're good PowerShell. You just email, right? I'm stuck here. What do? I didn't have that. When I was just trying this, trying that. It took me 2 weeks to make this script go into a database. However, today, if you ask me what failed 2 years ago, on this date for this server, bang, right? Because that's where you want to be. Where did the disk that you were monitoring 3 months ago, how come all of a sudden you have drive space usage going down, 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 down? What are you doing on that server? Is your databases actually growing at that rate, or are you having some developer dump his backup files there? How would you know? How would you prove that, right? Of course, you can buy the expensive monitoring tool and use something like that, but you want to be very careful of continuing to recommend to management or your boss, buy this and buy that, because then you couldn't go to some place called SQL Summit Pass, right, up in Seattle. That's where you want to go eventually. So you save the company money, and then, hey, you learn that at SQL Saturday, why don't you go and maybe you can learn some more, right? Save the company more money. So that's where you kind of want to go. You want to build yourself as a good PowerShell expert. Now, how come you're not learning PowerShell? That's the question. If Microsoft is saying PowerShell, PowerShell, gotta learn PowerShell, how come you're not learning PowerShell? I tell you why. Because as DBAs, we're kind of avoiding that era of going back to command line. And that's something for sysadmins to do. We don't have 1,000 AD accounts to create. But let me ask you this. What happens when you have to make a lab environment like this that's got 1,000 databases? You're going to do each one, but let's say your production has 1,000 databases. You're going to do each one, right? Backup, backup, backup. And then how are you going to bring that into your dev environment? Restore one by one by one, or are you going to use a script? I can script that in about a day and get all those databases, no matter how big they are, no matter how complex they are, I can dump that into my lab environment and get them testing, get my developers testing on that in 2 days. How can you do that, right? If you're going to click through every single database and restore each at a time, right? You won't, right? That project is going to be 2-3 months old. They're going to forget about it. Oh, DBAs are so slow. And you got to think faster, right? And PowerShell is there to help you think faster so you can manage better and you can make stuff like this. Now, what's nice about this is just homegrown, right? Something you can create on yourself and you can kind of learn as you go, and you can push it out and you say, hey, this is something that the company can use. And I kind of built all these PowerShell scripts now, and now the company swears by them. They don't want to move them, they don't want to update them, they just want to use them continuously. And of course, I want to keep modifying, adding to them. But here's the point. You want to keep improving yourself in PowerShell or SQL Server, right? Now, Kayleen is talking next door, and I know it's a difficult choice to come to PowerShell or 2014, but again, that's why you're here, right? You're a little bit above the crowd that just says, oh, well, I can just stay in my job. IT is hot, and I'll have a job for the next 5 years. Be very careful, right? Because the next wave is coming, and that wave may knock you out. We may all be looking for another job. But the DBA that has PowerShell experience could probably find a quicker job than one without. So imagine you're sitting there, and you're at the HR desk, and they're saying, well, you have equal set of skills, but one has PowerShell, and one has DSC, and one has this, and they've improved themselves by going to SQL Saturdays, by watching videos online. Who is going to shine for the new technology, right? The one that says, oh, well, I know DBA work, I'm done, or the one that keeps improving himself by coming to SQL Saturdays, by learning PowerShell, by learning all these tools and techniques. That one is going to insulate themselves from the next, perhaps, job. Do I have questions? Yes.
If you talked about your development environment, our development environment is all backed up and restored automatically, though, but using SQL tasks and DOS commands. So what's my advantage if I don't touch anything? And if I need to bring up another development environment, I go in and change 5 parameters and go. But I'm not using PowerShell.
So you
Why do I have to learn, I'm just going to go devil's advocate. Why do I have to learn PowerShell when everything is already scripted?
so your environment is scripted in a way that it's backed up and restored
Total, yeah.
in an environment
It can be moved between environments.
and can be moved between environments.
On scheduled jobs to be moved and refreshed the other environments already.
So
We have, I think, maybe one line of PowerShell code and all that.
so one line of PowerShell code, and his environment is restored and backed up. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Who can tell me? Come on, guys. Who can tell me? It's relied on a SQL engine, true, but something else is wrong. Something else is wrong. He's kind of insulated himself, but he's sure. But what about the new technology? What about the new stuff? Right? What about
Here's my thing. My company has an edict out. We are not going to 2012 because of licensing costs. End of discussion. Right there. We are going to Hadoop.
going to Hadoop? I love that one.
We're not, no, seriously.
But Mongo and Hadoop and Cassandra, all those, you've got a choice. You can use PowerShell, you can use Python to script them as well.
I'm using Python. Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, we're on Windows servers when Amazon is 3. I'm learning Python like there's no tomorrow. I can't run this
It's
on
just another tool in
S3.
the toolbox. Everything coming out of Microsoft is going to be PowerShell.
Oh, I understand that. I'm just asking. I mean, I'm doing a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Yes, I know.
Because I'm sitting here going, I'm learning, I have to learn Python.
hmm
I've got to go back to my Windows days, my Unix days.
Yeah, and learn.
Unix is a 4-letter word in my language.
Yes.
Not like, we don't get along, but I'm learning it again. So that's my whole question is,
So his company says no 2012, no 2014. So what would you do? And I'll tell you what I would do. I would continue learning PowerShell, and I'd continue learning Python. Yes, we don't have time to learn all the technologies, but I know 2 technologies that are very hot: Hadoop, Python, PowerShell. I'm going to learn the hot technology. Do you know why? I'm going to learn 2012. I'm going to learn 2014. Do you know why? Because maybe I'm going to be pushed out. Maybe some guy's going to come along, some young kid coming out of college, and he's going to know all the stuff. And we're all old guys. He's going to know all the stuff, and he's going to say, management, why you hired this guy? I can do it all. And management looks at your pay and say, hey, hey, guy, what are you doing? Right? Yes?
I can tell you why you kept me around. The last high school kid wiped out our entire Hadoop in one command in 30 seconds.
Yeah, but again, some other guy or girl is going to come up. They're coming up, right? The new kids are coming up. And eventually, they're going to compete against you and your talent and your skill. But what's going to keep you there? You got to keep on the edge, right? 2014, got to learn PowerShell, got to learn the Python, got to learn the Hadoop, got to learn the DBA stuff, right? And whatever you choose, whatever kind of role you choose, you kind of keep your feet placed on the technology.